Now back to the Trump presidency and John Dickerson, moderator of Face the Nation, joining us now from Washington. Always good to talk to you, John. And since we last spoke this time last Friday, 3 members of Congress have resigned after accusations of sexual misconduct. But with Roy Moore still running in Alabama, President Trump still in the White House, the Democrats seem to think that they've got the political upper hand here. Do they?
Well, we'll see. It depends on, it feels like there's more news to come, certainly about other lawmakers. I think everybody's very tentative about trying to claim any high road. I think what Democrats do feel, though, is that they, with their situation with Al Franken, took these accusations seriously. And so in the Senate, at least, they believe that they have handled their issues with a new standard, and they're waiting to see what Republicans will do with Roy Moore if he's elected. You know,
conservatives also point out, they point to Bill Clinton, himself the target of these types of accusations. Do they have a point in talking about that when the Democrats discuss what they have done for women's issues?
Well, there are a lot of Democrats who think in this reassessment moment that we're in that the party and that public standards have shifted, and that, in fact, if Bill Clinton were still facing today what he did while he was in office, that he would be treated differently. What's at issue here is how the standards should change, because everybody's changing. Hollywood, corporations, the media. And so what does politics do? Everybody can agree there were mistakes in the past in terms of the way powerful men used the system to keep their power and to keep quiet those making accusations. Now that that is shifting, what's the new standard? Who is listened to, and how much power does having power still get you?
We've talked about Roy Moore. Of course, that special election in Alabama is coming up next week. What kinds of decisions are the Republicans facing if he wins that seat?
If Roy Moore wins, it's a question between does the Senate want to overturn the will of the people of Alabama, or does and the alternative question is, do Republicans in the Senate want to set a new standard? And there are some standard for assessing accusations of sexual assault. There are a number of Republicans who feel those allegations are legitimate, that they are credible, and that Roy Moore's denials are not credible. But are there enough of those? And there will. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to get one more quick question in, because there is a story that perhaps Susan Collins of Maine could throw a monkey wrench into the president's and the Republicans' tax cut plan. Is that bill going to survive the conference hearings?
We'll talk to her about that on Sunday. She was made a number of promises to get her vote on the Senate version of that bill. She now is not sure those promises are going to be kept. We'll ask her what she'll do about it. I don't think she's all the way yet to voting against it, and even if she did, that wouldn't doom the bill. There would have to be others as well.
All right, I'll be looking forward to that interview on Sunday. John Dickerson, thanks so much, as always. And you can watch John on Face the Nation this Sunday morning, where his guests also include the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. That is Sunday at 10:30, only right here on CBS 4.